Hi, everyone. Welcome, nerdy knights of the well-rounded table aboard Bohemian Geek Studies Millennium Fandom. I'm Padawan learner Sara O'Connor, that queen of queries and defender of droids, and we are here to talk about Thrawn.
Oh my.
Woo! But before we dive
Really,
in,
Colleen, we're going in that early.
It already got warm in here, guys. And it's freezing in Minnesota.
speaking of which, Colleen, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Hello there. Indeed, today I'm Jedi Master and Rebel Scum collaborator Colleen McMillan, and I'm just going to make myself an honorary Chiss for this episode, maybe a few episodes moving forward.
Yeah, you are wearing a little bit of that blue, a little bit of that light blue.
It's actually my Chimera shirt. You can't see it, but it's got the little Chimera on it.
Interesting. And I am Pirate Jedi Anders Drew, back for some more Star Wars shenanigans.
And you know, we run the gambit here in terms of rank from Padawan to Knight to Master, but no matter the rank, dear viewer, one thing remains the same. Like young Thrawn, much to learn we still have.
Boy, does he ever. To set the stage, I actually did a couple of little short essays on Mithra Nurodo. That would be his full name, also known by his core name of Thrawn, which we will be using moving forward because it is easier to say.
Yes.
Thrawn was created by author Timothy Zahn in the 1991 novel Heir to the Empire, filling that kind of empty space that was in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. I don't know why I said that. Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace, which was like that in the 90s where people were like, what's going on with Star Wars? Does anybody like Star Wars still? Yes, they did.
I feel like we could say the same thing right now, though, sometimes as well, depending on which fans you ask at any given time.
Colleen, just to clarify that point, the timeline of Heir to the Empire is between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens.
Yes, this is the real world in which fans were in this sea of not knowing what was going on between the 80s and 99 when Phantom Menace came out. But yes, the empty space in between the real timeline, is definitely in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, which is a pretty big chunk. Pretty giant chunk. Like, thanks Timothy Zahn for giving us something. That's helpful.
Yep.
While Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy from the 1990s is much loved. It was decanonized by the Disney acquisition in 2014. So, so people were mad about that, you guys.
People are still upset about that.
People are still real mad about that. That's okay.
Best decision they made.
I love Legends. Like, I'm reading it right now and I really like it, but they did have to forge their own way, which I understand. And we still get Thrawn, so I'm not mad. Timothy Zahn, not caring who he's working for. He's like, you want me to write more Thrawn? I got you. I got you.
Thrawn.
So his first canon novel is called Thrawn, and it came out in 2017. But we didn't have to wait that long for canon Thrawn to make his way, a little sachet on screen. That was in 2016, Rebels Season 3. So that was kind of like our first intro to Thrawn, if you hadn't read any of the Legends novels. And he is chillingly voiced by Lars Mikkelsen, who is Mads Mikkelsen's brother. Both Star Wars bros, yes.
Absolutely great voice performance.
Ooh, yes. I thought that was perfect for Thrawn. He shouldn't be loud. He should just be this kind of quiet guy, unassuming, and that just lulls his enemies into a false sense of security, which is what he wants. So that introduced Thrawn to the newer Star Wars fans, or at least the canon-only fans, I should say. So, to really dive deep into our blue-skinned enigma, in addition to examining Thrawn's character, we'll be taking a few questions from you guys for a Master and Apprentice, not this episode, but later episode. Our fellow BGS Nerdy Knights, of course, have provided a lot of these questions, which are fantastic. And then lastly, we will be reviewing that latest novel that came out in September, Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising.
Yay, book club.
Yes, we're going to have a book club. We might have some arguments in the book club, but that's what book club is for. Drinking and fights. We're here for it. To state the obvious, this episode is going to be full of spoilers. So if you haven't met Thrawn, go and watch Rebels.
Yep.
Maybe dip into one of his novels or short stories. Then after you've enjoyed that, grab your favorite drink from the cantina and prepare to relax and unwind as we engage your mind. Are you two ready to punch it?
Jedi is always ready.
Yeah, let's do this. So, to kind of get started, why don't we give our personal opinions on this Suave AF Grand Admiral? What do you think,
Ooh,
Colleen?
well, you guys already know what I think. If it's all in a name, and I
Beyond
don't
wanting to jump him.
know. Yes, beyond wanting to be like, "What's up, Thrawn?" Like, hi, buddy. Like, I don't know if this is where Zahn got the name, but this is immediately what I thought when I saw it. It's a combination of thrall and awe. So you get your Thrawn there together, and it just sounds really cool. What fascinated me as a writer myself was that Zahn doesn't give Thrawn very many point of view moments. Like, none in Legends. You get none. There are a few scattered across that first novel, Thrawn, and like I said, none in Legends. It's always the other characters who are kind of trying to figure out what Thrawn's up to. They're always trying to get into his head, trying to like think about what his motivations could be. This is mainly because he knows too damn much. He knows all of the things that are going on with the plot.
Yeah.
So you can't have the one person who knows everything talking directly to the reader, which makes sense. There would be no surprise. Like Arthur Conan Doyle didn't let Sherlock talk. He had John Watson do all the talking. So that makes a lot of sense. But then a lot of people saw Thrawn, especially Legends Thrawn, if they only read Air, as kind of this like immovable, unemotional kind of monster almost.
Right.
And in
Kind of
Rebels
is.
too, he kind of has that real dark energy, not dark side energy, but just like, are we sure this guy's not committing multiple war crimes? Which
No,
he
he
definitely
is.
is. He is. But he's
He knows
also
it.
not this like, he's not a complete monster. He's not moving chess pieces across the board.
I love for
just
those
for
of you
his pleasure.
who are not watching, Anders totally made a justifiable face as Colleen was.
I mean, he's not. He does have his agenda, but he's not out here to do this for pleasure. Like that's not his thing. He's not malicious. This isn't a Palpatine inflicting pain and torture upon people. It's more like a meticulous ends justify the means kind of situation. Like I'm doing right and I'm the smartest, so what I think is right is right.
Some
And he
people would call that a
justifies it.
cleansing. Colleen calls
Yeah.
it. She justifies it.
Well, he's not out here cleansing everybody. Like
Potato,
just,
potato.
Just the rebellion. He's
Anybody who's not a
fan.
Chiss.
Yes, exactly. Well, plus the Chiss don't really chat with anybody, so that's kind of like, oh, Thrawn's meeting all these new people. He's like, oh, there's people? Yay. This is fun. It's brought up a lot of times in canon and in Legends later after Air that he doesn't like the loss of life. Like he is not in it for mass destruction. He will try and get the job done with 0 casualties if he can, and very low casualties if it's a possibility that there will be.
I think he's just trying to save on paperwork with that.
I don't think Thrawn has to do any paperwork. I think that is below his pay grade. I think he's making Eli do all the paperwork. Or Pelion.
No, he shipped Eli off. It's fine.
Oh, poor Eli. We'll get to him later. I think that he's a being of very deep feeling, but a lot of people don't get to see that because he keeps that very icy poker face exterior going on, except for his brother, Thras. Thras knows all about his brother, or he knew, and we're going to talk about that too later because I'm going to fight with Timothy Zahn about that forever. We get some real insights into his emotions in the journal entries that are from that 2017 novel, Thrawn. One of my favorites is about regrets, and this is where a lot of my feelings about Thrawn's kind of inner nature come from, are these journal entries that he made, and then some dialogue that we will cover later. But this entry is about regrets. Quote, "All people have regrets, warriors are no exception. One would hope it was possible to distinguish between events caused by one's carelessness or lack of ability, and those caused by circumstances or forces beyond one's control. But in practice, there is no difference. All forms of regret sear equally into the mind and soul. All forms leave scars of equal bitterness, and always beneath the scar lurks the thought and fear that there was something else that could have been done with Duncan. Some action or inaction that would have changed things for the better. Such questions can sometimes be learned from. All too often, they merely add to the scar tissue. A warrior must learn to set those regrets aside as best he can, knowing full well that they will never be far away." End quote. Dang, he's a
Interesting.
deep thinker, our boy here. Thrawn.
Never accused him of not being a deep thinker.
Well, a deep emotional thinker, I should say, too.
All right. So for me, I'd say, so my intro to Thrawn came when I saw him on Rebels, and he stepped onto the screen, and I kind of heard out in the zeitgeist that, oh, this was like a Legends character that had been brought in. But I was just like instantly drawn to him as a character because you can just see he's someone who's going to be reckoned with. Cold, calculating, very soft-spoken, kind of like a Snape character. That he just talks very quietly, but you hang on to every word. When he's explaining things, I was also kind of reminded of like Voldemort in the graveyard talking to his Death Eaters. He's walking around like, I'm disappointed. I admit it. And he just knows he's the smartest one in the room. I eventually I read the canon Thrawn trilogy. I'd go back to read the Heir trilogy. So one of the things that I loved about him off the bat, it's in the first Thrawn novel. You know, he does manage to save a bunch of this valuable gas that was being stolen and not kill the hostages involved. But his boss is like, no, you lost half the gas. That's what happened. And he's explaining, actually, I saved most of it. I stopped the pirates and I saved everyone's lives. And I think everyone has had one of those moments where like your boss is chewing you out for something. And you're like, actually, I did follow your method. I did it better and I did it more efficiently. Welcome to the conversation. But for me, the thing that was most intriguing about him is the fact that he's a Chiss. He's an alien, and he's this Grand Admiral. I think it's in the Revenge of the Sith novel, you get some of Dooku's inner monologue talking about how much he hates non-human species, and that it's no accident that all of the Separatist leaders are aliens, and that when the Empire comes into fruition, it is a human-centric thing. So to see this blue-skinned, red-eyed alien come in this position of authority automatically makes him a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah. And my intro to Thrawn, I actually can't remember which came first. I'm pretty sure that it was on a road trip and my husband Brennan was listening to one of the Thrawn audiobooks because I remember the chilling voice and going, ooh, it's like Sherlock Holmes, but like a little bit dangerous in a way. And
more Moriarty-esque.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that it's just very much Star Wars's version of Sherlock Holmes or Dr. House, or that like cool, calculating, always 10 steps ahead, the chess master, if you will. And I find him to be absolutely captivating. And when he's on screen, it's impossible to turn away. I mean, he's got that chiseled jaw. I can respect that, Colleen. But it's also that mind that he's got up there that's just, he's like a Venus flytrap. You're just buzzing to get in.
Charming. He's very charming. Gotta watch out for that, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody just watch out for that.
All right. So as we mentioned, Thrawn is a member of a species known as the Chiss. They are from the unknown regions of the galaxy. We don't know a ton about them, but Colleen, I think we did learn, especially in the newest, in Chaos Rising, we do learn a lot more about their kind of internal politics and kind of them as a species. So do you want to take us through a little bit of that?
Yes, I can get us started. This is one of the reasons I was so excited about the new Ascendancy trilogy, was because they were going to get into the Chiss, because we don't have a lot of it. It's just not very much out there, which makes sense. They're in the unknown regions, and the Empire really doesn't like aliens, so they're not out there looking for them very much. So most of this kind of comes from our discussions with Co-Jedi Master Matt Harrington. He also is really big with the Chiss and knows a lot about them. Needless to say, if we don't know about it, we kind of speculate about it here in the pod or when we write any articles about it, just because we really just don't know. We talked about how the Chiss structure Chiss Ascendancy is structured, kind of like, is it hierarchical? Is it a matriarchy? Is it patriarchy? We didn't know. There was a hierarchy posted on Twitter in anticipation of that September 2020 release of Chaos Rising, which was really cool. This like lit up Twitter when people were looking at it. The Chiss are governed by 9 ruling families that are always gaining or kind of losing respective power and levels of authority. So it's never in stone that you're going to be the best family. It's always in motion. But we didn't really know kind of what was going on with them. Like, is it like Game of Thrones? Is it like the Mandalorian power structure where there are the families within the lesser houses? For our world, is it like the Roman Empire or like Renaissance European kind of rulers? We still don't know if they have a supreme head of state. We don't know. We still don't know. We kind of saw them in an argument, Anders and Sara, in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, I'm like nodding along because I have not read the books, everyone. I'm just nodding along, having a good old time.
You started Chaos Rising. We get like the 9 ruling families who are basically just fighting with each other about what they should do.
It always kind of struck me, I mean, it is just based on that, and I know we'll get into more of this when we actually cover Chaos Rising in full, but it struck me kind of a little bit like Game of Thrones, but a little bit also like, I don't know if either of you guys or if any of you people out there have read the Dark Elf trilogy, The Forgotten Realms by R.A. Salvatore.
Oh,
that's Drizzt, he's the Dark Elf, and it's very much these like ranking families, and the structure of every family is very rigid. Like, you're only allowed to have X amount of children, and if you have more than that, you have to start sacrificing them, and all this stuff is going on. It's
that sounds incredible.
It's an incredible
book. What is it again?
The Dark Elf trilogy.
All right.
It's the Forgotten Realms series, but I digress.
No worries. We can always shoot out ideas for books. Like, yes, that's what we want. Speaking of getting back to our Chiss, Anders, do you want to go over a little bit of that structure we found out about?
So yes, so we do get a little bit of a sense of the kind of hierarchy within each of the families. You start at the top. There is the patriarch, the head of the family. According to the people at Del Rey, though, this does not have to be a male Chiss. So even though they're called the patriarch, could be a woman. And that's pretty true for most of the ranks throughout the families. The Chiss don't really care in terms of power and authority, whether you're a male or a female, except in a small case. So they do have the Chiss use Force-sensitive children to navigate through hyperspace.
Oh.
It's an incredibly interesting system, and they call them Skywalkers. So a child who is Force sensitive is a Skywalker. Usually they get trained, and then whenever they're aboard a ship, they have an assigned caretaker. And for the most part, the Skywalkers tend to be female, whether that's just the midichlorians work out that way in the Chiss species or whatever, we don't know. And the caretakers tend to be mostly female in that kind of nurturing, motherly type role.
Supposed to be nurturing.
Supposed to be, yes.
The Chiss, man.
So below the patriarch,
with children.
Scroll here, whoever's doing that, scroll instead of tippy tap for our audio listeners.
All right. That actually might be me just like adjusting on my chair. Sorry.
We're good. We're so good.
So below the patriarch, you've got the speaker, who's the chief syndic of the family. The syndic are kind of the political representatives on the council of families, kind of like a chairman or a representative, senator type deal. Obviously, below the speaker, you have the rest of the syndics, who are members of the syndicature. That's the main governing body. Thrawn's Legends brother Thras was a syndic. And then you've got the patriarch, who handles kind of the family affairs on a planetary scale. So just kind of like, okay, this is what's going on in the homeworld, an administrator type. Below them, you have counselors, who handles family matters at a local level, so just within a particular city. And then the aristocra, which are just any kind of mid-level member who is part of one of those 9 ruling families.
Awesome.
I thought they were much higher too in the hierarchy until we got into this book. I'm like, oh, they're not. They're kind of like the paper pushers almost, which is
True,
really
but these families
interesting.
are not necessarily families in the way that we might think of them. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about the different ranks within a family
Yeah.
that we learned in Chaos Rising?
Yeah, there's definitely an ordered hierarchy. So, like, first and foremost, blood, just blood, man, which is pretty much the direct blood relation of the family. Then we've got cousin underneath that, and we don't quite know the difference between cousin and blood, because you'd think that there's blood relation with a cousin, but it might be that they're far enough down the family tree, frankly, that they're not considered direct blood. And this could also be for a Chiss who marries into the family. So underneath that, we've got ranking distant, and that's not blood related either, because trialborns can reach this level in the family. So then underneath that, ding, 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 yeah, you guessed it, trialborns, which is a Chiss merit adoptive that goes through a series of mental, physical, and psychological tests to earn this rank. And then finally, underneath that is the merit adoptive, which should be quite familiar to us when it comes to Thrawn. Any member of Chiss society has the chance to become this merit adoptive so long as they catch someone's eye. And Thrawn and his brother Thras from Legends, and correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Thalius, are merit adoptives.
Yeah. This kind of reminds it when I saw this structure, it actually kind of reminded me, going back to some quote unquote classics of like Capulets and Montagues and Romeo and Juliet. You've got the core family, Romeo and Juliet are kind of blood. They are the actual sons and daughters of the patriarchs. Then you've got their like kind of extended cousins. And beyond that, you have like the allies that are all still considered part of those quote unquote families, almost like a mob.
Yep.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm sure everything's going to be fine in the Chiss society, you guys.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Nothing can possibly go wrong with this.
Nothing. Everything's fine.
Colleen, can you list for us the 9 ruling families? Would you mind doing that for us, love?
Yes. I was so excited to get this list. This was another thing that dropped on Twitter before the release of Chaos Rising, that all of the family names hadn't been canonized yet. So I was like, yay! We finally knew who the damn 9 families were. Up until that point, we maybe knew 2. So also, do we know if they're equal in power? Do we know if the one who's listed as the first family, are they actually the first family? We still don't know that either. So going in order, we have Ufsa, and I'm also going to try and pronounce these and might not get them right because I haven't listened to the audiobook yet. The Ufsa is number 1, and Samakro from Chaos Rising was a merit adoptive of this family. We have the Irizi, which is where our girl Aralani comes from. Her original core name is Sara. Number 3, we have Dasklo. And these ones we haven't really met anyone from yet. So we have Dasklo at 3. Number 4 is Klar. Number 5 is Shaff, which is Aristocrat. I think his name was Formby from Legends. Another great one. We're going to have to talk about him at some point. Number 6 is the Pleek. That one is the one I'm really not sure how to pronounce, you guys. Number 7 is the Bodil. Number 8 is our Myth. This is Thrawn's family, his adoptive family, symbolized by that sunburst that you see on his uniform in pictures. And then number 9 is the Obik.
Nice.
So those are our 9 ruling families. We don't know if they're all going to be there at the end of everything, guys.
This is true. Probably by the end of the Ascendancy trilogy, they'll be there.
They'll still be there.
Whether or not they're there when we meet Thrawn again post Rebels and any kind of hints we get at that in The Mandalorian, we don't know. But so next, all right, so as we've mentioned, Thrawn came in, he basically, his books really started the expanded universe, which was then decanonized as Legends, and he's kind of come back. So our friend Sean Starward gave us effectively an essay question to try and answer here. How different are these 2 iterations of Thrawn? You've got canon Thrawn and Legends Thrawn. So how alike or different are they anyway?
And I'll say, as a watcher of Rebels but non-story enthusiast, this is something that I'm interested in learning as well.
I was too, because I first met him in Rebels and was like, who dat? This guy seems really cool. I've been thinking about this differences between Legends and canon since I finished Treason, which was the third canon book back in February of this year. I hadn't planned on it, but after I read these books, I knew I had to tackle the expanded universe. I was not going to, you guys. It was like, that's 300 books. No, just not going to do it.
And then quarantine.
And then quarantine happened. And also, I was like, I want to read more about Thrawn, though. He seems really cool. So I had to get the full picture. And in order to do that, I needed to start with the Heir to the Empire trilogy. And since Timothy Zahn created both Thrawns, there had to be like this character kind of timeline in his mind, this kind of track along which Thrawn walks. And he has said that it's basically the same person from Legends to canon. We just don't have all the connective tissue there yet. Canon Thrawn is still my favorite. I like him.
I'll agree on that.
Quote unquote, like him more than Legends, except for maybe one of the books in Legends I really like him in. But I did want to write a quick comparison, which I did way back after I finished reading the Heir to the Empire trilogy. I might do a longer piece at some point. We don't know.
As is your way.
Oopsies. I never have trouble writing longer pieces, you guys.
We know.
Yeah, know me well, you both do. But for now, we're going to go through his characteristics in canon and Legends, kind of like break it down a little bit instead of going all over the place, and provide our thoughts on this wonderful character. So we're going to look at his age, his personality, and his actions, because we really need to look at his actions, you guys. Anders, would you like to tackle the... So many more crimes. Would you like to tackle the first category?
Yes, so we're going to start here with Thrawn's age. And this is actually one of the more key components to his character because it really cues the reader or the viewer into where his mindset might be. So Chaos Rising shows us a teenage Thrawn, which is our earliest canon iteration. He's still in school. He's bound for the military academy. He's kind of awkward, shy, but inquisitive, really determined. As far as Legends go, Outbound Flight is the Legends book with the youngest version of the Thrawn Commander overall. He's very, very young at that point. Commander Thrawn of the Expansionary Fleet in Outbound Flight is pretty close to his older selves, but there's some subtle differences. He shows a little bit of a sense of humor. He really loves and really embraces that he is the smartest guy in the room, and he likes to show off a little bit. He is very quick to tell Darth Sidious that he is, in fact, the youngest Chiss to ever have his command level. He's also really curious about new cultures, something that definitely carries over to his future self. And he's willing to learn from new people, not just through observing their art, which is kind of his primary way when we meet him in Rebels. He even shows outward exhaustion to someone not his social or species level, someone he actually considers a friend, if he can actually have those later on. These things make him vulnerable in a way that the Thrawn we met in Heir to the Empire just can't afford to be. But ultimately, how old is he?
Right.
There is no definitive answer. We don't know in canon if Chiss age in the same way humans do. They seem to. Overall, they seem to follow a general trajectory that most humans would. But, don't know. They could mature very early and then just live a lot longer. They could be kind of like Wookiees who live to be like 400 or 500. We have no idea. But Colleen, you gave us a few guesses here, just trying to throw together a general timeline. Most likely in the Memories chapter of Chaos Rising, he's roughly a teenager. And then in Outbound Flight, he's in his mid to late 20s. In the Alliance's flashbacks to when he first meets Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, he's in like his mid-30s. Or sorry, he's still in his late 20s. He's in his mid-30s during the main part of the first Thrawn novel. And then from Alliances up through the present, he's in like his mid-40s. And then by the time we get to Treason and after into the Heir trilogy, he's into his late 40s, early 50s.
Mm-hmm. We really don't know, though, because Timothy Zahn doesn't like that kind of detail. He does not.
No. Or he just doesn't think it's important. You never know. But his relative youth in Outbound Flight, and the flashback portions of Alliances show this kind of curious explorer. And then when you get into the older Heir to the Empire, you get this seasoned commander, hardened by war, very, very, I don't want to say emotionless, because as Colleen pointed out earlier, he does have some deep emotions, but he's not willing to necessarily show it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not willing to suffer fools anymore, and he gets tunnel vision towards those future goals.
Mm-hmm.
His experience doesn't mean much in the end, though, as his youthful respect for other cultures has fallen away. Would that younger Thrawn from Outbound Flight have treated the Nogri like slaves?
I really would hope not. I think younger Thrawn would be kind of appalled at his older self for what happens a few times later in canon and in Legends.
I think older Thrawn would have smacked him back down and said, "Shut up and get back to work."
Oh yeah, for sure. Older Thrawn has got to be looking back at his young self and being like, "You fool," just like, "You idealistic moron." But he still had that. I was really bothered by it when I read the Heir trilogy, just because his casual disregard for the Nogri was awful. We want to look at some of his experiences with slavery in the novels, just because there's this really interesting spectrum where he goes from young, idealistic, like we said, to cold, calculating, fuck the Nogri, there are our slaves, and that's just how it's going to go, old Thrawn. I wanted to look at the Wookiees who are in that first canon Thrawn novel, the Nogri in Legends, and then the Vagari slave ships in Outbound Flight. Fuck the Vagari, by the way. We can just say that going on. I'll start with the Vagari because, no. Not great. Not great, guys. They're not just pirates. They're slavers. This is Outbound Flight. Young Thrawn. He's a commander. He's real hopped up on being a commander. But he's really disgusted by the Vagari and their cultural practices in this book. The Vagari are a nomadic conqueror race who use slaves in defensive ways on their ships. Hi, Dunk. Yes, we know, and we love you. We know and we love you. Yeah, hi, Dunk. Hi, baby. Yeah, you can come sit by mommy while we talk about slavery. That's fine. The Vagari use their slaves in these kind of bubbles outside of their ships, so that if anyone attacked them, the first people to die would be the slaves who are on the outside of their ships, basically like plastered to the outside of their ships. And that was their first defense.
Operation Human Shield.
Yeah, human shields, pretty much.
Right.
Every species imaginable shielding them. And Thrawn is disgusted by this, and he tries to avoid tactics that would put the slave species in danger. Sara, do you want to tackle our next guy?
Yeah, so for the Wookiees in Thrawn and Eli intercept some escaped Wookiee slaves, and Eli is frankly uneasy about the Empire using slaves, so I don't know where he's been getting his intel, because that's been going on for a while.
Yay, propaganda.
Yeah, while Thrawn debates whether the Wookiees are indentured workers or sold themselves into slavery, he agrees that they are most likely innocents. However, he also believes that they are now under the control of the Empire and must be treated as such. Ew. He was quick to rationalize their actions. How about the next group, Anders?
So next we have the Nogri, which are in Legends. The Nogri's home planet was devastated in an attack during the Clone Wars. Vader discovered them several years later, and the Emperor concocted this kind of scheme that they were going to, quote unquote, save the planet. And as payment for saving them, the Nogri had to give up their sons to military enslavement, serving as bodyguards in a private military group. When Leia discovered the lies the Emperor had been perpetrating, the Nogri planned their revenge against the Empire. Thrawn's own indentured bodyguard, Rook, killed him in the third Heir book for his complicity in that slavery. So slave rebellion.
Stabs him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Uh,
Yeah, just no. And Rook also was in Rebels, but Zeb basically kills him.
I don't remember
Rebels.
him at all.
He was the
Yeah.
little tiny kind of murder machine that Thrawn sent after.
Oh, that's Rook?
Oh, okay.
That's Rook. Yeah,
His assassin. Okay.
Mhm. In
I don't think I
Legends,
ever
he's
actually
like,
realized his name.
in Legends, that's his bodyguard who stabs him
Yep.
Mhm.
to death. So Thrawn in Legends is dead. Spoilers. So these are in chronological order that we talked about. The Vegari from when Thrawn is younger, the Wookiee when he's in his 30s. So you should know better still, Thrawn. Come on now. And then the Nobri throughout the Imperial era. So what would make his behavior change like this? What besides aging and becoming more jaded could possibly do this? What do you guys think?
I'm actually not sure if it's anything truly beyond that. I think
Right.
that I think it does have to do with him, quote unquote, growing up. The Chiss as a culture tend to be very insular. They are very concerned with themselves and not necessarily concerned with others. But even with that kind of a thing, when you're young, you're still a little bit more idealistic. But then as you grow up, particularly in a military setting where you are effectively conditioned, that the mission becomes all that matters.
Right.
So even when Thrawn is serving the Empire, his mission, as we learn throughout the canon trilogy, and I assume we're going to get some more details on in the rest of the Ascendancy trilogy, his mission is to basically scope out the Empire and see if they are going to be a threat to the Chiss or if they can be an ally against their enemies. And so that's the mission. Don't really care about anything else. I am currently serving the Empire and scoping it out. Whatever their deal is, that's fine. I'll follow it. Slavery? Cool.
Yep. Yeah, I can't put it any better than that. So why don't we get moving along to your favorite or one of your favorite categories, Colleen, his personality. Why don't you take it away?
Oh yeah, it's a puzzle, you guys, which is why we're doing so many pods about it. He's a military genius, of course, but does he have a personality?
He does.
He does.
It's there.
He really does. Very well hidden. The heir Thrawn doesn't really have much of one because we can't see past that kind of cold demeanor, especially at first. In the first book, you don't. He's more, like we said before, the Moriarty than Holmes at this point. He's that enigma to Captain Pelion, who is his subordinate, and the rest of the Chimera crew.
Mm-hmm.
Though they do respect him, they realize that he is a very competent leader, so they will follow him. He's calculating, he's confident, he expects the best from everybody, but it's difficult to get a read on him. You can't read him at all. He's got that blank face kind of thing going on, where people who rely on facial tics wouldn't be comfortable with him at all.
No.
The level of self-control is admirable.
Yes, very admirable. And in canon too, you learn that he notices body changes and body temperature changes.
That's the Sherlock
also.
Holmes kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So he's also very aware of himself. So he's not going to give a lot away, especially when he's this older Thrawn he's got shit to do, guys. Like doesn't have time to be joking around with Pelion about much. He's got that legendary poker face, like we said. He's the tactical genius. He's the most formidable opponent, I think, that the Rebellion and the New Republic in Legends ever has to face until the Yuuzhan Vong come along. I think that maybe spending so much time in the unknown regions fighting all of these different cohorts kind of turned him into this older version that we see in Heir. Plus, he was out there when the Rebellion blew up all the Death Stars, you guys. So he's probably feeling a little pissed about that. He's like, I knew I shouldn't have been sent away.
You know what? He was doing his TIE Defender project, all right?
Yes.
He told the Empire, don't invest in that Death Star. Yeah, putting all your eggs in that basket is not going to go well.
Like, the beautiful tactical military mind is working there. He's like, why? You don't need a death ray. You need like 1 million very maneuverable death rays.
Exactly.
Like,
Stupid Governor Price blowing up the fuel depot.
Oh, yeah. Governor Price. Yeah, no. Now is not the time to be talking about her. I feel like this is the Thrawn in Heir that would have been pulled into the unknown regions by the Purgle if Ezra doesn't go with him. I think that's going to kind of be this fulcrum, if you will, in Thrawn's life like if he was in the unknown regions without someone who could temper him, I think this is what he would become in heir. But he's got Ezra with him, so we don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, he's still going to be really angry and persistent, hungry to prove that he's worthy of his duty. We don't know what his future looks like yet, of course, because Timothy Zahn and Dave Filoni would have to figure that out together, I think. But I think Ezra will eventually pull down some of the emotional walls, or at least we'll get to see that happen, hopefully, probably, because I'd like to see that side of Thrawn come out, just kind of that exasperated guy. I think one of our questions was, how long would it take for Thrawn to get pissed off with Ezra? It's like
he already is.
Second.
He's starting that way.
He's already mad, y'all.
I could totally see them like in a cave somewhere though, and like there's some Ezra is like playing with some like little equivalent of like a loth cat.
Yeah.
And just having fun, and Thrawn's like, "What are you doing? That thing has no purpose." Da, 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 da. Yeah. And he just like Ezra just gets him to play with the little fluffy cat.
Yeah, he's like, "Look, Thrawn, it's a cat. He's so cute." Thrawn's like, "Fine, I will play with the fluffy cat."
Yes.
That would be wonderful. I mean, and Thrawn also, he does show that sense of humor with Arlani in Treason, which is great. Arlani's like, "You're gonna fuck up someday. Nobody's gonna be there to save you." And he's like, "Haha, you will be there to save me because you always are." And this is one of my favorite quotes from Treason. She says, quote, "Someday you'll overthink and overplan, and it will come crashing down around you. Ding, ding, it does."
Or squeezed by tentacles.
Right. Squeezed by tentacles. And she goes on, "When that happens, I hope someone is there to lift you back to your feet."
Again, tentacles, pick him right back up.
Exactly. Yeah, the purple are just gonna like put him down nicely, and then put Ezra down nicely, and then be like, "Have fun, get along," and then they're just gonna leave. But this is the Thrawn I want to see. I want to see him pissed off, because you don't get to see him mad very often. You do get to see it with younger Thrawn. He's got so much personality. He's a little remote at first when he's encountering new people. But once he understands them, he kind of opens up. He shows that really dry sense of humor, and he allows a couple people to get close to him, which I love. He enjoys taking people under his wing. George Cardus from Outbound Flight is one of them. Eli Vanto, one of my husbands, and Karen Farrow.
How many husbands do you have?
2. Just 2 husbands, at least.
2. Okay,
right
how many side pieces?
Oh, that's difficult to talk about, Anders. We don't want the husbands hearing about that.
You think you can marry Eli, have Thrawn on the side, and he won't hear about it?
No, that wouldn't happen. If I marry Eli, Thrawn's gotta go. Sorry, buddy. Eli has my whole heart. And there's a reason, too, because Thrawn actually likes Eli, which is awesome. He has that nurturing aspect, Thrawn does. He loves to show people loyalty once they've kind of proven to him that they deserve it. And this really shines through in canon. You can kind of see how his dual allegiances are pulling him apart a little bit in Treason when he's trying to balance between the Empire and the Chiss. Arlani comes along, he's like, "Sup, girl? I remember you and my obligations, but then also I have to listen to this Emperor and try and keep it going on."
But I think even in that, I thought he was very still kind of quote unquote like in control of all of that. He basically like that happened and he adapted instantly, and he was like, "Yo, Arlani, Vader, all you gotta do, trust me, I got this. I am serving both of your interests at the same time. It's gonna be fine."
That sounds like Thrawn.
Yes. And Arlani, for the most part, believes him. She just is worried. Like, Vader doesn't care if he fucks up. He's like, "Oh, that's just another Grand Admiral that's gonna go if the Emperor doesn't like him."
Yep.
Whereas
And an
Arlani's
alien
like,
to boot.
"Please don't die." Please don't get yourself in a situation where you're going to die. Oh, but next, this is our third little thing we're going to look at for the differences between Legends and canon. Sara, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'm going to hop on this category, and it's really his actions, right? Air Thrawn, which we already talked about, straight up killed a subordinate at a station over a mistake. Do you have anything else to add, Colleen, to that?
Yes. This bugged me forever.
Does Colleen have anything to add?
Bugged me so much. It just doesn't seem like Thrawn. Like any other Thrawn, even in the Heir trilogy, this one moment is so out of place.
Interesting.
He has Rook kill this guy, first of all. Just kind of like, he's like, yeah, just like snaps his fingers and Rook kills him. So down the research rabbit hole I went because I wanted to know, like, what is going on here? He never does this again.
He does.
Ever.
Wait,
He never
Now-
kills another subordinate.
I'm trying to remember now. Is it pre-Thrawn then in Rebels? There's the two Imperial commanders that kind of fuck up, and they're having the conversation in the office.
No, that's the Inquisitor.
That
kills
is the
them.
Inquisitor who does that. Okay.
Wait, oh yeah, that's Tarkin.
Mm.
Great look, Tarkin. Yes, and that's why I thought it was so weird, because that's like a Tarkin Vader move. That's not a Thrawn move. He's more like, let's give this ensign some more training and see if he can do better at his job. It turned out these two characters, the one who lives and then the one that gets killed. This is Ensign, and I'm going to butcher this name, guys. This is a real name. Colclisure? I think he's the tractor beam operator. And then Peterson, who's his kind of subordinate tractor beam operator. They're named after two people who won a charity auction to have their names be included in the book, which is really cool. Like, it drummed up a lot of positivity for the book and for the series. It went to a great charity. But the guy who won, whose name is Colclisher, got to decide if Peterson's character was killed or not.
Whoa.
So it wasn't Zahn driving the bus here. It was this random charity auction thing. So he had to kind of fit it in there, which just doesn't like...
I like that explanation for actions that did not make sense at all.
Just to clarify though, did Colclisser get to pick effectively which one of them died, or did he just get to pick whether the other one died or lived?
He got to pick whether Peterson died or lived. At least that's what the interview question answers.
Because I was going to say that if he just got to pick which one of them died, that would be like, well, no, then one of them dying was what the subordinate dying was definitely in the works.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if it's you just got to pick if the other one died or lived, that makes sense. Okay.
Which makes me really wonder about Colclisher, the real person.
Yeah, and so like while this only happened once in the book, readers would expect it to happen again, as Thrawn's crew probably did. But the one thing that separated Thrawn from Vader was not using that kind of reckless cruelty. Canon Thrawn not only listened to his subordinates' suggestions, but also frankly encouraged them. And in Treason, Ronan says that he doesn't know of any admiral who would put up with, like, frankly, insubordinate behavior, but he also notices that no one on the Chimera is nervous around Thrawn. They're an absolutely harmonious crew and know their commander respects them. Canon Thrawn is always ready with a question, a lesson, and shows pride when people have things figured out. He really does groom people for command. And Thrawn might have had these tendencies, but he just doesn't have the time. While he asks Paleon questions, he's less likely to listen to their contrary opinions. Thrawn has been hardened by his experiences. He trusts his crew to a point, and we can't see Thrawn letting people make their own tactical choices.
No.
Very true. And in that sense, it's actually, even though we've been doing it for the past, 20 minutes or so, it is kind of difficult to compare canon and Legends Thrawn, mainly because Timothy Zahn has taken years to cultivate and grow this character. He says they're the same one, so there has to be a reason Thrawn is cold as fuck, and the Heir trilogy happened the way it is. I mean, that's from the early 90s. We're going on almost 20 years. Outbound Flight is from 2006. And canon begins just 4 years ago, 2016, with Rebels Season 3 and the first Thrawn novel in 2017. So overall, I said 20 years earlier. It's actually, I messed it up. It's 30 years.
Yeah, that's
Thrawn.
wild.
Oh, shit, yeah.
It's been 30 years.
2021, 30 years.
30 years.
Oh, crap, 30 years.
Since Thrawn first appears on the page, to when the prequel novel Ascendancy Chaos Rising gets published. That's a lot of time to plan out a character and character growth, give him a compelling younger adventures, let him grow and really flesh him out.
Yep. I would love that amount of time to work on one character. That would be amazing. I would say, like, going back to just kind of comparing the two, one of my favorite moments is in Outbound Flight when Thrawn asks Cardass, not to crush the optimism of their mutual acquaintance, which also is like, this is Legends Thrawn? All right, like, he's a baby at this point. He's just a wee baby. He says, quote, "There are too few idealists in this universe, too few people to strive to see only the good in others. I wouldn't want to be responsible for crushing even one of them." Like, how the hell did this guy turn into Heir Thrawn? It
Just
has to be
ascendancy in the Empire.
Yeah, just it makes me very sad.
I mean, it is in the Heir trilogy that we are basically introduced to the entire concept of the Grand Admiral. We don't know a lot about the Imperial Navy beyond like general ranks and things. He is the first quote unquote Grand Admiral that we meet, so we know instantly that this is a extremely powerful officer. So he's got to be pretty hardened to achieve that rank.
Yes, and considering the other ones that we do meet, like, he's actually the nicest one, you guys. He's actually, even in Legends, he's like the nicest of the Grand Admirals that there are.
Even in Aftermath, Rae Sloane is still only an admiral. She's not a Grand Admiral, right?
Not until later in canon.
Not until she effectively founds the First Order.
Yeah, when she's like the only one left, then she gets to be the Grand Admiral. Yeah. I should say Pelion becomes Grand Admiral, and he's delightful. So there's one who is nicer, or quote unquote better, the better person than Thrawn is. I did enjoy that he was an total outright antagonist in Legends at first. Like, that was great. It was really cool to see this guy who was actually a problem. Like, our protagonists are not going to easily defeat him. They just can't think like he does, technically. Our friend of the pond, Sean Mellon, actually asked us why Thrawn is such a popular Star Wars villain, and I think that's because of it. He's different from Palpatine and Vader. He's like that breath of fresh air. He doesn't use the Force, which is another really cool thing. He is still able to beat Jedi, like Luke and Leia, and he doesn't have the Force.
Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I think it's also because he's fighting for something other than absolute power. He's fighting for his people. And so there is some kernel of redemption, frankly, regardless of how horrendous his actions are. There's still that keystone of why he's doing it, even if us viewers still don't know enough about the Chiss or their motivations, or there's, I think, that kind of linchpin of logic that holds people to Thrawn and leave them enthralled. Go ahead, Anders.
I think so. He makes a very good successor in viewers' minds to Tarkin. He's got kind of that same energy. Swagger to him, energy, but it's that little linchpin of like motivations and what's really behind it that sets him apart and makes him a more compelling villain. And he is not the one to stand on the Death Star and just refuse to believe that it can't blow up. He's probably discovered that flaw 5 years ago and has an escape plan.
Right. Yeah. And I also think, I lost it. Never mind. We'll get it back. I'll get it back
to it. Yeah, I think making him an alien was an excellent choice, and also an alien we didn't recognize. You got it. You got it back.
That's what I was going to say. Thank you, Colleen, for jogging my memory. I think because he's also treated as an outsider in the books, there's that level of sympathy there too. If you've ever felt like an outsider, you understand just because he's an alien or alien-esque does not mean that he does not have redeeming qualities to offer. And so I think there's a little bit of ourselves sometimes in Thrawn, despite how horrible the outcomes of some of his choices are.
Yes. Like, he's a guy you can root for, even though he has done terrible things. Oh, come on, you don't root for him in treason? I totally do. Especially when he's... I mean, it's really difficult because I worry about him and his outcome and the outcome of his crew.
I mean, you're rooting for him or like Palpatine. I mean, the choice is kind of made for you.
Yeah.
That is true. And he usually is like the lesser of two evils, which makes it easier to root for him.
Yeah.
He's
I
fascinating, and that's why we keep talking about him, is
He is.
because
He is
he
truly
has
fascinating.
so multifaceted for
I think so
a
too.
more an
Those
antagonist than a villain.
those frankly are some of his defining traits, the absolute belief in himself and those motivations. I mean, as we've pointed out, Sherlock Holmes is a dead ringer analogy, and he wasn't popular either. And Thrawn could care less about popularity no matter which one we're reading.
The only difference is we like Sherlock's law enforcement. We like the people he works for.
Any closing thoughts, Anders or Colleen, before I close us out?
I don't think so. I know we're going to cover a lot in Master and Apprentice. We had some very good, very in-depth questions. So we got to move a lot of stuff over into that section.
Cool.
I will say, to kind of close out, I mean, Colleen, you mentioned earlier that you think the current canon Thrawn is your more favorite of the two iterations of the character. And I'm definitely going to agree with you on that. I think it's really just really interesting because, I mean, even though it has been over a span of 30 years, it's always really interesting to see when an author or a filmmaker or whatever can effectively reboot their own work.
Yes.
So in introducing Thrawn into the new canon, Timothy Zahn kind of has this chance to like take everything that worked, port it over into the new canon, and discard anything he ultimately didn't like. So this kind of like second drafts of the final version, I think, is what makes the newer Thrawn the quote unquote better Thrawn.
Sweet.
Yes. More engaging, I think.
A little bit.
Well, join us again next week to geek out and engage with us in our special for Thrawn's Master and Apprentice.
Yeah.
And as a friendly reminder, if you enjoy us in our podcast format, you can find us on iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And in the meantime, help us grow by heading over to our YouTube channel. Hello, welcome. And subscribing and telling other nerdy knights to join us, because it really does help. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Check out our show notes on how to reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and reach out to us via email at bohemiangeekstudies@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Art critiques, books up, and keep those episodes streaming. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.